Frankfurt dazzles the world with its skyscrapers and banking empires. But just steps from the stock exchange, a different reality unfolds. We break into the streets they don't show in brochures, where heroin needles glint under neon lights and the air reeks of urine, sweat, and cheap liquor. Locals have renamed it Crackfurt, a chilling blend of its name and the drug epidemic consuming its core. This isn't Europe's financial pride, it's a waking nightmare. From luxury to lawlessness, from power suits to shivering figures on cold concrete, this is the side of Frankfurt they want you to ignore. Follow us deep into the city's underworld, where survival, addiction, and silence rule. Number 1, Frankfurt's Zombie District. Just a few blocks from the luxury shopping streets and steel glass towers of Frankfurt's financial district lies a neighborhood that feels like it belongs in a different world or a different century. Welcome to the Bahnhofsviertel, the infamous quarter around Frankfurt's main train station, or Hauptbahnhof. It's here that the shine of Europe's richest economy fades into something far darker. Something many describe, quite literally, as a real-life zombie land. Locals call it Crackfurt, a chilling nickname born from the city's name and the drug crack cocaine. And it's not just street slang, it's a label that reflects a devastating reality. Every day, hundreds of people wander through the area like ghosts. Their movements slow, their gazes hollow, their bodies bruised and trembling. Many are deep in the grips of heroin and crack addiction. According to city health officials, over 3,300 individuals in Frankfurt are considered active drug users, and the majority of them are concentrated in this district alone. In just 1 year, more than 135,000 instances of crack use were recorded inside the city's supervised drug consumption rooms. And that's only what happens indoors. Step outside, and you'll witness something rarely seen so openly in Western Europe: public injection of hard drugs in broad daylight. On park benches, in alleyways, even beside tram stops, users crouch to tie off veins, unaware or unconcerned that children or tourists may be watching. And it doesn't stop there. Drug dealing happens openly, sometimes just feet away from uniformed police officers. Dealers lean against walls, hands in pockets, scanning the street with the confidence of someone who knows they won't be stopped. The police are present, but rarely intervene. It's not unusual to see officers walk past an active drug sale without so much as a glance. Locals have come to call it a performance of law enforcement. They arrest someone today and let them go. By tomorrow, the same person is back in the same corner. In this part of Frankfurt, law doesn't feel absent. It feels irrelevant. The social breakdown doesn't end with drugs. Germany legalized prostitution in 2002, aiming to bring safety and regulation to the industry. But here, in Bahnhofsviertel, the red light zone looks less like a system of protected workers and more like a market of desperation. Women stand in doorways, dressed in lingerie under jackets, calling out to passing cars and pedestrians. Flashing neon signs advertise special services. Some brothels look like they belong in a dystopian movie, with their tinted windows and metal security gates. While Germany officially registers around 28,000 sex workers, experts believe the real number may be twice that, especially in cities like Frankfurt, where many operate without oversight or health protection. And in Bahnhofsviertel, the line between sex work and human trafficking becomes dangerously blurred. Here, drug addiction and prostitution feed into each other. Many women work to afford their next fix. Others are caught in cycles of abuse, debt, and control by pimps or criminal groups. The stories repeat themselves. Different faces, same tragedy. Crime statistics paint an even grimmer picture. In the first half of 2024 alone, Frankfurt's main station recorded over 1,090 criminal cases, with an average of 6 reported incidents per day. These range from pickpocketing and street fights to drug-related violence and assaults. And that's just the official data. Residents say the true number is likely far higher, as many incidents go unreported or are simply ignored. The atmosphere is tense. You can feel it. There's a heaviness in the air, like the city itself is exhausted. The smell of urine lingers in doorways. Trash blows across the pavement. The flickering lights of kebab stands and adult video stores offer little comfort. Conversations are hushed. People keep their eyes down. And yet all of this plays out just a stone's throw away from one of the richest banking centers in the world. On one end of the block, financial consultants in suits. On the other end, a man slumped against a wall, syringe still in hand. This isn't just about poverty. It's about a complete collapse of social infrastructure in one of the most visible, strategic locations in Germany. And it begs the question, how did it come to this? That's what we'll uncover in the next chapter of this story. But for now, take a moment to let this image sink in. This is not a war zone. This is not a failed state. This is Frankfurt, Germany, in 2025. Number 2. Lives lost in Crackfurt. In Bahnhofsviertel, human lives unravel in full view of the public eye, and yet go completely unseen. Maria is one of them. Just 5 years ago, she was a nurse in a local hospital, caring for elderly patients. Today, she sells her body in the cold corners of the red light district, her income barely enough to feed a crack addiction that took hold after the death of her daughter. "I didn't plan this," she says, staring blankly at the neon flicker above a brothel door. "But after I lost her, everything else just stopped making sense." Her story echoes across the neighborhood. These are not isolated cases. They form a collective reality. One block away, Jürgen lost his job during the pandemic. The next domino was rent. Without enough savings, he was pushed onto the streets. Frankfurt's shelters offered him 7 days. After that, nothing. He now sleeps beneath scaffolding not far from a bank he once helped build. He's tried reaching out for help. Soup kitchens help. Shelters offer 7 days of accommodation, at most. Drug rehab centers? The waiting list is over 3 months long. By the time your name comes up, he says, you either don't need it anymore, or you're not around to answer the call. Then there's Aisha, a migrant in her early 20s, came to Germany with hope. But language barriers and social exclusion chipped away at her chances. A friend introduced her to tranquilizers to ease anxiety. Heroin followed. Today, she doesn't remember the last time she slept indoors. These are not just personal downfalls. They are the results of a system stretched too thin, too slow, and at times entirely absent. Frankfurt, like many major cities in Germany, faces a growing crisis, a widening gap between social promises and lived reality. Access to long-term housing, mental health support, and rehabilitation is limited. Drug treatment centers are overbooked, with waiting lists stretching for months. Without stable housing, even those seeking help often have nowhere to return between sessions. Prostitution, while legal in Germany, adds another layer of complexity. In theory, it provides regulation and protection. In practice, especially here, it leaves many vulnerable to exploitation. Legal oversight thins out quickly in dark alleys and unmarked buildings where many operate without registration or access to health services. These conditions don't exist in a vacuum. They feed into one another, forming a loop: addiction, homelessness, sex work, violence, then back again. Law enforcement is present, but largely symbolic. Officers walk the streets, often ignoring public drug use or solicitation. Sometimes they intervene, only to release individuals hours later. The same faces reappear in the same corners, the cycle uninterrupted. In interviews, some officers admit they feel like they're cleaning the ocean with a broom. Amid all this, it's easy to point fingers. But these aren't just statistics or cases. These are people, many with histories of hard work, family, education. What they share is not failure, but abandonment. When society looks away long enough, suffering becomes normalized. And while some non-governmental organizations offer meals, blankets, and basic health care, the scale of the problem dwarfs their capacity. They're fighting a flood with teaspoons, dedicated, tireless, and heartbreakingly aware of their limitations. Frankfurt has not forgotten how to grow. The skyline proves that. but it may be forgetting who it leaves behind in the process. Maria, Jürgen, Aisha, they are not symbols. They are human beings who needed someone to say, "We see you, we'll help." And for years, no one did. This is not just a story about poverty or addiction. It's about visibility, dignity, and the quiet violence of being ignored. Until these people are seen, truly seen, Frankfurt's identity as a global hub will always rest on fractured ground. Number 3, why Frankfurt is falling apart. Frankfurt wasn't always like this. Once hailed as a post-war miracle, a city rebuilt from the ashes to become one of Europe's leading financial centers, Frankfurt now finds itself facing a very different kind of crisis, one that can't be solved with money or modern architecture. The truth is, Frankfurt's decline didn't happen overnight. It was years in the making, layered like bricks in a wall. Urban planning choices, economic inequality, patchy social policies, and a failure to include the very people it invited in. Let's break it down. 1. The high-speed engine of urbanization, and who got left behind. Back in the second half of the 20th century, Frankfurt grew fast. Too fast, maybe. The city became a magnet for banks, tech firms, and international business. With that came shiny skyscrapers, luxury high-rises, and neighborhoods that began to price out the very people who once built them. Property values skyrocketed. By the early 2020s, residents were spending more than 40% of their monthly income just to keep a roof over their heads, far above the affordability threshold. This process, known as gentrification, pushed low-income families out of central areas. Many ended up in or around the Bahnhofsviertel, Frankfurt's main station district, a neighborhood that would eventually become the epicenter of the city's social collapse. What's even more troubling is the economic divide that grew out of this urban shift. While parts of Frankfurt became a playground for the ultra-wealthy, other areas fell into neglect. Today, the city holds two realities, one of wealth, access, and progress, the other of poverty, addiction, and survival. 2. Social policies that sound good, but don't go far enough. Let's talk about drug policy. In the 1990s, Frankfurt pioneered what was seen as a progressive approach, harm reduction strategies like clean needle distribution and supervised drug consumption rooms. The idea was noble: reduce overdose deaths, minimize the spread of diseases, and treat drug use as a public health issue instead of a criminal one. But somewhere along the way, the system got overwhelmed. As of 2025, Frankfurt's 4 supervised drug rooms report over 135,000 uses of crack cocaine every year. Outside those facilities, it's a free-for-all. Addicts shoot up in alleys, on park benches, and beside playgrounds. Drug dealing happens openly, often within sight of police officers. Law enforcement admits their hands are tied. Legal gray zones, understaffed departments, and a lack of political will have turned the Frankfurt way into what some critics now call organized helplessness. The intention was harm reduction, but in reality, it's turned parts of the city into de facto drug zones, places where crime goes unchecked and social decay festers. And the cost isn't just in numbers, it's in the stories. The children who grow up seeing syringes on sidewalks, the residents who no longer feel safe in their own streets, the users who want help but are stuck in months-long waiting lists for rehab. 3. Immigration without integration, a missed opportunity. In 2015, as Europe faced one of the largest refugee movements since World War II, Germany opened its doors. It was a moment of moral leadership, and for many, it was a lifeline. Frankfurt, being an international city, absorbed a significant portion of this wave. But the welcome wasn't always followed by a plan. By 2024, nearly half of all job-seeking welfare recipients in Germany were non-German nationals. Many newcomers to Frankfurt struggled to learn the language, navigate the bureaucracy, or access job training. Without meaningful support systems, too many fell through the cracks, ending up in informal labor, temporary housing, or worse. For those already vulnerable, the transition was brutal. Faced with discrimination, unemployment, and cultural isolation, some turned to underground economies. Others, unable to find footing, slipped into addiction or petty crime. And when problems emerged, the system was often too slow, too stretched, or too fragmented to help. This wasn't a failure of compassion. It was a failure of coordination. When people are invited in but not truly welcomed, they become invisible. And in cities like Frankfurt, the invisible eventually gather in places like Bahnhofsviertel, where everyone is trying to disappear or trying to forget they exist. The result, a city split in two. The consequence of all this is a Frankfurt that feels like two cities stacked on top of each other. One is bustling, global, full of opportunity. The other is broken, tired, and desperate. And the line between them is heartbreakingly thin, sometimes just a subway stop apart. This division isn't just about income or real estate. It's about who gets to feel like they belong. It's about the teenager who has never seen a doctor because his mother has no health insurance. The grandmother evicted from her rent-controlled apartment after 30 years. The immigrant who knows 5 languages but can't get a job interview. The addict who's been waiting 6 months for a detox bed. And it's about the average resident, trying to walk to work past open-air drug scenes, wondering what happened to the city they once called home. Where do we go from here? Frankfurt doesn't need a miracle. It needs a reset. Solutions exist, but they can't be band-aids. The city needs bold investment in affordable housing, not just construction, but policies that protect tenants, support low-income families, and stop displacement before it begins. It needs a rethink of drug intervention, not just harm reduction, but paths to recovery that are accessible, humane, and fully funded. And it needs a new approach to integration, one that treats immigrants not as numbers in a quota, but as people with skills, hopes, and potential. Above all, Frankfurt needs to remember its own story, a city rebuilt from ruin once before. The difference now is that the damage is not from bombs, but from neglect. The question is, will it rebuild again? This time for everyone. Number 4, Frankfurt versus Berlin. When people think of Germany, they often picture order, prosperity, and precision. Sleek trains arriving on time, bustling marketplaces lined with bakeries, and clean, efficient cities powered by innovation. But zoom in closer, and the picture starts to blur. Because beneath that glossy postcard version lies a country with many faces, and perhaps no two cities show that contrast more clearly than Frankfurt and Berlin. Let's start with Berlin. The German capital, known for its rebellious spirit and messy charm, has always been a magnet for artists, immigrants, and outcasts. It's rough around the edges, but alive, full of color, contradiction, and character. In Berlin, you can sip craft beer in a hidden bar 1 minute and stumble onto an underground techno rave the next. It's chaotic, yes, but there's a rhythm to it, a kind of organized chaos that somehow works. Social issues? Sure, Berlin has them. Homelessness is rising. Rents have climbed sharply, by more than 26% between 2014 and 2023. And the number of available social housing units has dropped dramatically, from around 115,000 in 2016 to just over 93,000 by 2024. Projections say it could fall even further, to under 60,000 by 2028. That's a huge gap, especially when over 500,000 households in Berlin qualify for social housing. But here's the thing. Despite all that, Berlin still feels like a city that's trying. Its drug policies are more balanced, blending prevention, education, and harm reduction, rather than simply managing decay. Open drug scenes exist, yes, but they're not sprawled across the city's center in plain sight. The police, while not perfect, tend to act when needed. Community groups work closely with local governments. And perhaps most importantly, there's a sense that people matter here, even the ones struggling the most. Nightlife in Berlin is more than fun. It's a kind of therapy. People come alive in the clubs, in the food markets, in the shared chaos of weekend flea markets and all-night bars. You can feel the cultural diversity on every corner. Turkish falafel stands beside Vietnamese noodle shops, African barbers next to punk-themed bookstores. It's messy, but it's human. And now, cut to Frankfurt. From above, Frankfurt looks like a financial utopia. Its skyline is all steel and glass, clean lines, and clean money. The European Central Bank is here, multinational corporations, banks with vaults deeper than the subway system. In fact, Frankfurt is one of the richest cities in Germany, if not in all of Europe. But step outside those towers and the contrast hits like a punch. In the Bahnhofsviertel, Frankfurt's central station district, a parallel world unfolds. One where drug users slump against graffiti-stained walls, prostitution happens openly, and crime feels like part of the urban background noise. Unlike Berlin's structured nightlife, Frankfurt after dark often feels tense, unsure. Even locals admit they avoid that area when they can. And it's not just perception. Statistically, Frankfurt records one of the highest crime rates among major German cities. Drug use is rampant. Even the city's social services seem overwhelmed. Efforts that were once seen as progressive, like clean needle distribution and open drug counseling, have become symbols of a system stretched thin. Police presence feels more like passive observation than intervention. Some residents describe the response to crime as theatrical. Arrests happen, but the same faces are back on the same corners within a day. Then there's the deeper issue of how Frankfurt treats those who fall outside its economic vision. Unlike Berlin, where creative communities and immigrant enclaves have been allowed to flourish, Frankfurt feels increasingly divided. On one side, the ultra-wealthy dine in Michelin-starred restaurants overlooking the main river. On the other, just a few blocks away, the homeless set up tents under train bridges, surrounded by empty cans and used needles. It's a split that's not just physical, it's philosophical. Who gets to be seen? Who gets to belong? Even everyday Germans are noticing. When interviewed, many say they avoid Frankfurt altogether. They call it a dark spot in an otherwise modern, civilized country. Tourists often say the same. We expected a European business capital. What we found felt more like a city in collapse. Meanwhile, Berlin, with all its messiness, still feels alive. It still feels like Europe. That's the real irony. Frankfurt, built to represent success, now symbolizes neglect. Berlin, often criticized for its disorder, somehow holds things together. One city polished its image so much it lost touch with its cracks. The other embraced its cracks and turned them into community. None of this is to say Berlin is perfect. Far from it. Attacks on refugees and immigrants have risen in recent years. In 2024, there were 77 reported assaults on asylum seekers, and at least 8 violent incidents targeting refugee housing. Far-right ideologies are gaining ground in some parts of the city. The pressure is real. The tension is growing. But even then, Berlin pushes back. Protests are louder, civil groups more active, solidarity still breathes in the margins. In Frankfurt, things are quieter, but that silence speaks volumes. The contrast is sharp, sobering, and necessary to confront. These are two cities in the same country, with similar challenges, but very different responses. And that contrast? It's more than just urban planning. It's about values. It's about what kind of society Germany wants to be. Germany is a land of precision, history, and beauty, but also of paradox. In cities like Berlin and Frankfurt, we witness two faces of the same nation, one striving to preserve culture and inclusion, the other silently unraveling beneath the weight of inequality and neglect. This is not just a tale of urban design or economic policy. It's a story of people, of how cities either lift them up or leave them behind. As travelers, we often seek out landmarks, skylines, and postcard moments. But sometimes, the real story lies in what's not advertised, in the alleys, the silence, the eyes that don't look back. If this journey made you think differently about the cities we visit and the stories we choose to see, consider leaving a comment below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you'd like to explore more raw, honest travel stories like this one, feel free to like this video and subscribe to NVL Travel Documentary. There's a whole world waiting, and not all of it is polished. Until next time, travel deeper.